And then Scott decided he was potentially hazardous material and thought he shouldn't come in and spread it around. So that's probably a wise thing. So I actually talked about life on Earth, building bodies in a similar way. It was 7 years ago, December of 2017. And I refreshed it a little bit and brought up some of the talk that I did before. A very interesting woman, Nicole King, who's a MacArthur Fellowship grant person and interested in some of these. We'll talk about her soon. I think I made a point 7 or so years ago that young people should try to follow and see how she looks and investigates the world and the things she's done. She's, like I say, a MacArthur grant winner and works for the Howard Hughes Medical Institute now and so on. So does some really interesting things that extrapolate. Welcome. So I don't have it fleshed out as fully as I would have if I would have had some more time, but Scott bailed, and he will be coming back soon, but is unhealthy right now. 2 weeks from now is, I think, when Mike Albrow, our friend Mike Albrow, is going to be back talking about a book that he wrote and some physics things that he's done and so on. So that's of interest. I'll actually be just getting off the train after a 46-hour ride from Chicago to Seattle. So going to see the family out there. We decided to take the train out there because I can bring a bike out to my daughter that way. For $20, you can put a bike on the Amtrak and travel around the country. So that's better than taking it all apart and putting it in a box to get on a plane and so on. No, but we did take the train back when we rode. Dave Gorman and Mark Ailes and I rode to Washington, D.C., and then we took the train back and put our bikes on the train and took the easy way back. So anyways, so that's 2 weeks. And then I believe Karsten, who's come to a lot of the Science Sundays, is going to be talking about some things in later on. And so we've got things planned for February and March and so on. We always thank the fact that we can meet in this this area, this community. This supports us and searches for the truth and meaning and the interdependent web of life that we're all a part of, and we're glad to be here celebrating time together like that. Thanks. Joanne's getting the doors because it's a little bit noisy behind us there too. This is an amazing fossil, a remnant of from many, many years ago. Yes? Question? I am Mike Winter. Okay, yeah. I've run the Science Sunday along with Scott Thompson since about 2012, I think. So, yes. So this is an amazing fossil. This is from the Ediacaran Hills in Australia. And it's actually one of the first conglomerations of cells that made a living thing, right? And I talk about pretty regularly, I try to bring up the point that if you look at life on Earth as talking about the span of your hand from fingertip to fingertip, you know, the life on Earth is about 4 billion years old, right? The planet was only here about 4.5 billion years, so in fairly short order after the planet was formed, and we'll talk about more of that, life developed on Earth. But for so much of that time, life was only a single cell, right? Unicellular, right? So if you look at it, if you look at time going on through all this, this is 1 billion years, right? Life formed pretty much right at the tip here. All of here's 1 billion, 2 billion to the center line, 3 billion years before any kind of thing lived on this earth before that was more than a single cell. So imagine at that time, down to about here is 3 billion years, around here is somewhere where we talk about the Cambrian explosion, when we start seeing some of the wild animals that formed at that time in the seas. But all that time, and to cut it short, if you look at the time that humans have been around in history, making history and agriculture and things like that, you could take it off with a dusting of a nail file, right? That would be the time on Earth of that time. So it's an interesting way to keep it in mind as you're talking with people, and we talk about our importance of people on Earth and so on too. All right. 3 billion years of life. And what kind of life was it when it was single cellular life? A lot of bacteria, right? And maybe a bit of just single-celled algae and so on, things like that. Then they talk about protists and so on from there too. But just single cells for all that time of life. So today's main goals, I want to go through, discuss the conditions on Earth that led to the development of multicellular organisms. It's kind of odd if you think there's 3 billion years of time that things were going along. The Earth was going along fine as only populated by single-cell organisms. Then, in that time that went on from there, that's when multicellularity took place. And why is that, and what's going on with that? So what are the conditions on Earth that led to that? A little bit about how it's surmised that multicellular organisms flourished. How did that come to be? And a deeper look at one way that multicellular organisms may have developed, and this is this MacArthur Grant person, Nicole King, has done some interesting studies on that. So we'll talk about that. The Hadean eon, 4.5 billion years ago, to the end of the heavy bombardment of 4 billion years ago, this is what the Earth looked like, right? As it was first formed. Just immense kinds of under-earth volcanic activity. Heavy bombardment was striking of this all by asteroids. We talked about that a little bit earlier. A lot of it was thought to have occurred, all these asteroids and comets and things were hitting our Earth because Jupiter and Saturn's planet was in close to ours at that time and caused disruptions and gravitational forces that changed things and caused asteroids and comets to come striking the Earth. So that's what they called a heavy bombardment. It was definitely not a place for any kind of life at that time, right? Too hot, too poisonous of an atmosphere, terrible, terrible conditions for any kind of life. All right. And then 4 billion years ago, things started settling down. And in fairly short order, almost miraculously short order, or scientifically interesting short order, life developed. In not a lot of time, after it became possible, life formed, which has implications for life in other planets as well, too, when you look at it realistically. Okay. So the Hadean eon. A little bit of what caused the beginnings of life. I'm not trying to maybe go deeply into this, but give some ideas about what's needed and what was finally evident on the Earth. Necessities of life. Sponge. Anyone know? We talked once long ago about sponge. Okay. Sponge, I jumped to sulfur, phosphorus, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and hydrogen are classically considered very important for life as we know it. Only the things of necessity to create any kind of potential potential capacities for life to be there. So it's a good way to remember it, sponge, and you can work it out from there. All those are necessities. Water is obviously necessary, and it came from Earth's rocks and emanating out from that, and also or from comets too. The heavy bombardment of comets could have caused a lot of water to be on Earth. When you think of all the water that's on Earth, it's hard for us to imagine nowadays that it came from comets hitting us, but quite a lot of it did actually, or it's surmised that way. Panspermia is the concept, if you're talking about reviewing what could cause life on Earth. Panspermia is the concept, the theory that maybe living things got transported here, right? On comets, possibly, deposited from asteroid hits or things like that. deep in the hearts of things that hit there. That's one possible way that life could have got here. And there also were studies that were done back in the 1960s, I believe, in the University of Chicago, right in town here, where they took some of the creative elements, some of the natural elements that were on the earth at the time, and along with heat and electricity that could have come from lightning strikes or so on, they got the development of neutrino acids and potential beginnings of forms of life too. So some of it could have come from other places, and some could have developed naturally in some ways here. There's 4,000 million. Sometimes you say 4 billion and you don't think of that. It's just a different way to think about it. 4,000 million years of life on Earth. A fascinating concept, right? And again, 3,000 million of it were just single cells, doing well. Bacteria in simple forms developed quickly. And as soon as the Earth seemed habitable, life started showing up here, okay? So this kind of leads another way to look at it, because it's a lot of words laid out here. And this is an interesting graph. You can get it in Wikipedia, I believe, if you start talking about early life on there. But it's a circular graph that starts here at this point, and it moves around in this rotation. This is talking about the Hadean eon, when conditions were just terrible for life. And this is about 4.6 billion years ago, formation of the Earth. And formation of the moon was not much later after that. Potential collisions between what became the moon and what was the Earth at the time, at about that time. 4 billion years ago, end of the late heavy bombardment. So that's in that time frame. And this is when first life started, just very quickly after that. Up to 3 million years ago, earliest start of photosynthesis. Okay, so first time that actual cells could take the power of the sun and start turning it into product for themselves, right?
Would that be single cell or multi-cell?
All single cell here. There could be, not even at this time, but later on, there'll be mats of single cell things that kind of interact with each other, that lay on each other for protection. But this was all single cell life, definitely. You won't see multicellular life for quite a while. Oops, hitting the wrong thing. All right, down here, first major increase in atmospheric oxygen levels based on the photosynthesis and plants or plant-like creatures photosynthesizing and putting out oxygen. Oxygen levels started to increase on here. First major increase in atmospheric oxygen levels, and the first snowball Earth event, okay, where the whole globe was completely covered with ice, right? So these interesting parts here, all through here, this is finally the eukaryotes here. All this purple line is showing prokaryotes, and prokaryotes are viruses, bacteria, cells that have no nucleus, right? So very simple creatures. And here, they're still single cell, but they're prokaryotes, in which they've got a nucleus and cell structure that allows for a little bit more specialization inside the cell. So this is the first time that there's even a cell that has a nucleus in here. And there's 2 billion years till now. Up here, this is the start of multicellular life, right around this point. It's projected. About 1.7. Okay, and even that, I'm not sure. The more we talk about, we'll be talking about things happening more at this time. Okay. I started the talk with a picture from the Edacarian Hills, some of the first creatures that we have evidence of. You know, fossils don't replicate. Fossils don't last very well for single-celled creatures. It's very hard to find them. You can find evidence of them, maybe some of their respiration evidence you can find in it, but you can't really find. They're so soft-bodied of animals and microscopic that there's no easy way to locate them that we've developed right now. So up in here, you start getting into some of the more current things. Here's the Cambrian explosion. Down at this point is about when the Edacarian mats that was probably one animal, as far as we can tell, of a fairly complex creature. And then we start seeing the first vertebrate land animals at this point. Mammals start coming around and non-avian dinosaurs at this time. And only 2 million years ago, the first hominins come out at that point right there. So it's an interesting way to look at the whole progression of life on Earth as well, too. So when we're talking about the development of multicellularity, it took a long time to get to it, and once it did, there's been quite an advancement since then. So if we start looking at about the time that multicellular organisms are thought to have come about, you can start thinking about what conditions there were on the Earth. Anyone have any ideas first of what conditions were like, what the Earth was like 750 million years ago? What's that?
I was thinking 750 million years is just before the second snowball.
Yeah, there's a snowball Earth kind of thing around this time. Okay. All the land masses were near the equator, centralized and near the equator, they believe, at this time. There was, at that time, no life at all on the terrestrial surface. Life was only in the seas. It's the only way they could support and have moisture. Many of these cells that formed didn't even have original cells, had no cell walls even. And they were just there kind of floating around. But no life on the surface of the Earth at all. The most complex life were bacterial mats on the ocean floor. And they were still single-cell bacteria, but they were gathered in a place that was beneficial to them, right? So there were large mats of them could grow, and once there was life and once there was food to eat and sunlight and decent atmosphere and so on, then they could grow pretty immensely, but they were still single-celled animals that were just mats of things growing together. Rain and erosion removed minerals from the atmosphere. All this stuff that was in the atmosphere from the Hadean times and different times was starting taking minerals that kind of seeped out of the atmosphere. And low levels of greenhouse gases. They were very efficient, very good, not much CO2 because not much CO2 was being made. The CO2 was being taken out. The CO2 that was there from the whatever volcanic activity would happen would be taken out by the plants and by the things photosynthesizing down there. So it's kind of a picture of, a visual picture is here, talks about a little bit more. So this is about 750 million years ago. And this is showing a graph kind of showing a climate model of what was going on at that time. This is showing temperatures. You're probably more used to the Celsius temperatures up here, where 0 is about what it is today, right? 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So there were temperatures above that at some of this time and way below it at other points in this time. Okay. But about 750 million years ago, they postulate that most of the land masses were near the equator. Temperature was similar to maybe what it is now. And then things started going into this cycle of loss of heat, okay? And there was one of those kind of what they talk about now. You heard of positive feedback loops and negative feedback loops? If you think of a thermostat at your house, that has actually what's called a negative feedback loop, right? If your temperature goes down in your house in a cold day, the thermostat sees that and does something to counteract that and makes the temperature go up again, right? So a positive feedback loop feeds on itself. They talk about that, for example, if in all the tundra of Alaska, if that starts melting, you don't have that white snow reflecting sunlight back up into the sky. You have it turning to dark earth, and that starts soaking in more heat. And that's a positive feedback, right? Where then the land gets warmer, then more ice melts, then it gets warmer, more ice melts, and it's a positive feedback loop that makes heat go on and makes the climate warm. This is one where, as this started, there was nothing really. There weren't plants, there weren't things around to counteract this, and so we went through, they think, maybe at least 3 different snowball Earth episodes. And at about 750 million years ago, this time went, you start seeing this feedback loop going very rapidly, and it stayed that way. This positive feedback loop stayed that way for quite a long time, right? 10 to the third is 100,000. This is like maybe 1 million years. So all under ice, under frozen there. And finally, there was something, then we'll talk about that a little bit too, what caused it. And there's, again, a change that brought it back to getting rid of that, and then some level of balance between the two. Okay? Any questions about that? That's pretty understandable, I think. Okay. Snowball Earth from 770 to 635 million years ago. Okay. 100 million years, right? 135 million years.
135 million, yeah.
It may have looked something like that. Maybe every once in a while when there's a volcanic eruption underground or something like that, maybe there was a little bit of melting in areas, but then it would freeze up again. Everything that was alive at that time, what would happen to it? Either die, right?
Yeah, those would die.
Or go into extended, long, suspended animation for quite a while. Life on Earth had to weather through this all, literally. So a return to the temperate climate. These are some things I think helped cause it. Tectonic plate movement, continental drift, just move things around, and you see how tectonic plate movement causes volcanoes to come to the surface in different places like Hawaii and so on. So that can cause heat to be put back into the system. We needed heat back into the Earth's system. Volcanic activity pushing CO2 into the atmosphere. So it was actually a good evidence of global warming at that time that was beneficial and useful. And plant life that came back at that time, it increased oxygen levels through photosynthesis. So all those were in the negative feedback loop that now it overcame the positive feedback loop and brought us back to a more temperate climate. Okay? So, these are some questions about how it's surmised that multicellular organisms flourished. And when this happened, when all this ice that was there, frozen over all the globe, it had scoured up as glaciers and so on, it had scoured up a lot of minerals and things like that. So as it all melted, all these minerals that had been frozen up in this ice now were dropped either on land where they had some benefits or into the oceans. So all this calcium and all these different minerals that had been picked up by the glaciers now are coming down into the water and onto the land. Increasing warmth was obviously beneficial to life. And the oxygen levels that were rising so fast, all these are categorized. Oxygen is supposedly, it's a very catalytic type of molecule in which it provides a lot of energy, right? When it's used, it's a catalyst for a lot of energy. And then multicellular organisms would flourish because of some evolutionary developments. Predation, the arms race would help. If you're a tiny little bacteria, there's tiny little things that are all willing to eat you all the time. But if you start matting together with other things, and if you start developing some multicellular characteristics, you have more protection, right? The minerals, what would animals use minerals to do?
Build shells.
Build shells, right? Defenses. It became an arms race, right? That predators wanted to find ways to eat more things, to grow and to feed themselves, and they also wanted to stop themselves from being fed on, so they'd start building things. So a lot of clams and trilobites and different things like that that could protect themselves and couldn't be so easily eaten up. You'll see in a while these small, tiny little choanoflagellates we'll talk about. Just by stirring the water up a little bit, they get bacteria to come along the sides, which can then osmose right into their systems, and that's how they feed, right? So any kind of protection that any small creature could have to protect itself from larger predators would be valuable. So it's a benefit to get larger, to fight this. And vision is something too. How does vision help you if you're a predator? You can see your prey, right? You can chase it down. You can locate it, and it can't escape you very easily. Does vision help those that are being predated upon? Big time too, right? You can see something coming before it sees you, and you can burrow down or whatever your methods of defense are.
It's
Joanne?
also been suggested that it involves feeding processes, that during the day you can go higher into the, or lower into the ocean, and during the night you can go higher and higher. So you're looking for the optimum feeding zone based upon the amount of light.
Yeah, and light, yeah, anything that's light sensitive is the beginning of vision. So you know where things tend to want to go or tend to want to avoid, and you can plan your predation or your protection from predation based on all that, right? Yeah. There's some really interesting studies about how vision was just like this powerful change in the whole way that animals worked, right? Once there was vision involved, it just changed. It was a game changer, okay? This is another talking about oxygen, which is one of those areas that we talked about in affecting multicellularity. So this is talking about back in time, and this got cut off a little bit in my chart making, but this is 1 billion years ago. We talked about 2 billion years ago, so it comes way over here, and oxygen percentages were very low for the first half of Earth's time, right? Here's 2 billion years, about when oxygen levels started picking up, when photosynthesis got going, right? And it hit a plateau here for a while, and at about 1 billion years ago, so way over here, right? All this time that there's just bacteria, oxygen wasn't that critical. Bacteria, you know, can be aerobic or anaerobic. It can be useful in oxygen or utilize oxygen or not. And most of this was anaerobic bacteria at that time. So when oxygen started going up and up and up and up, look at the things that happened. Roughly 800 to 600 million years ago, the first animal emerges, right at this point. Oxygen was very crucial for its capacity for something that has so many cells, you know, tens of thousands of cells possibly, or at that time maybe less, to get the energy it needed to survive, right? At 500 million years ago, the oldest known animal fossils, that's where we found them. And this is the famous Cambrian explosion and the rise of the carnivore. At this time, this is when predation and vision are the first evidence we have of either of those things, okay? And the oxygen levels were astronomical there, over 30%. We're at this point, we're at about 21% oxygen in our atmosphere right now, okay? So it was a much different atmosphere at that time, okay? So that leads us to maybe one theory of how multicellular organisms could have developed. And to do that, we have to we'll talk a little bit about a few different topics in here. This is something that's around nowadays. It's a liposome, but it gives us some kind of insight into what was around in the past, possibly. You may have heard about hydrophobic cells. You know what hydrophobic means? You can break it up. Hydro means water, and phobic means fearful, right? So hydrophobic cells repel and stay away from water. And then there's also other cells that are called hydrophilic, right? And that likes water, right? I was going to offer, every time I anthropomorphize things, I was going to bring a dish of treats here. And when you caught me doing that, I'd throw out a treat to you. They don't really like water, right? So that's the first catch, at least, of it. But so keep looking for that. If I say that, I'm trying to maybe make a picture in your mind that you can understand the points I'm trying to make. But obviously, these things have no feelings, no sensations of things like that, too. You can see experiments where they have hydrophobic sheets of quartz or something like that, and you put a drop of water on it, and it just explodes. It goes away as fast as it can. It can't stand that. See, there I was again, anthropomorphizing something. It gets away from it. So if you're in a big watery environment, these things look very similar, but they have a tendency that's different about them. If these are in a watery environment, these outer cells with the little flagellates, the little things going toward the inside, you might consider these possibly to be what? Hydrophilic, right? That they're attracted to water, okay? These inside here are protected from the water that's around them, and these might be hydrophobic with their little flagellates pointing out. So you start getting some level of individual cells cooperating with each other in a way that builds a larger structure. They protect each other. There's this sense of almost communication or working together to solve a problem, okay? And that's kind of what we'll see in a lot of this going on. I'll show some other pictures, similar things. Have you heard of stromatolites?
Oh,
Big
yeah.
mats of bacteria that were photosynthetic. These are in Shark Bay, Australia, and these are from a billion or 2 years ago, I believe. And these are the remnants of them that were fossilized. Okay, so these are the mats I was talking about of things that were individual cells, but they got a structure working together that allowed them to do it. They got calcium in it, and they fossilized, so they would have been large blue-green mats of algae here at one point. When we start talking about predators and the Cambrian creatures and so on, these are some pretty famous ones. Scott and Dave, I think, makes 3D printed models, and he's got this Anomalocaris, which could get up to 2 meters long, taller than anybody here, okay? And living in the water. This is a major change of multicellularity, right? And it was a carnivore. It would eat other animals, okay? So we're kind of seeing what's going on with all these different, you see the specific capacities of vision, Okay? And look at this out here. Opibinian. Doesn't it? Yeah, yeah. In fact, yeah, so this is an artist rendering, obviously, of what they think they looked like. Here's Anomalocaris' fossil, an actual fossil of one over here that you can see to see what they use to come up with what they think it looks like now. So pretty amazing stuff. 538 million years ago, roughly, something like that. So again, if you look on this whole list, single cell, single cell, single cell, to here in our timeline of life on Earth. Okay. But to get to these points, this obviously isn't the first step, but they call it the Cambrian explosion because it occurred so geologically quickly. But how did it get to that point? And that's where Nicole King comes in. Like I said earlier, the MacArthur Grant winner. There she is. She went to University of Madison, graduated from there, spent some time at University of Indiana, I think, and now she's out in, she's in Harvard, I believe, and then she's out in Berkeley and at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute now. And so she started looking at, and she got involved. Originally, what do most biologists look at when they're young? What kind of creatures are they studying, and we think gives us a lot of insight into living things? They're tiny, and they're usually around your kitchen most of the time. Fruit flies, right? Drosophila. And she started working on that, and she didn't really like the Drosophila. She thought they were bothersome. So she got into this choanoflagellate. And this is an actual electron microscope picture of one. And you can see two of its classic things pretty easily in this picture. It's got a large cell structure at front, and then you can also see the flagellate, the tail on the back. This is an evidence of something that's their third specific action too. And when we get to another picture, that's a little collar, you'll see it better. Here's another picture of one. Okay, so all this cell material in here that can do all these things. The tail and the collar in here. And basically this thing flutters around in the water. The tail flips around and does two things. It propels it, right? And the second is it pushes bacteria that's in near it, and it creates a little bit of a vacuum in the way it flips its tail, and it sucks in bacteria to it. And the bacteria then gets digested, osmosed into the system, and that's how it lives. It can move and it can eat, and it can reproduce. That does its job, okay? So she started looking at this, and she's thinking, like I mentioned earlier, when the first multicellular animals came around, or even organisms, they weren't even animals yet, they were living in a soup in the water that was basically filled with bacteria and other tiny creatures, right? They had to survive in a world like that. So those that could predate on that was good, right? But bacteria really created the conditions that the first early multicellular organisms had to survive in, right? They were bound by the life that they came into, which was dominated by bacteria for, again, 3 billion years, all right? Choanoflagellates are actually closer to us on the scale of life, on the tree of life, than plants are, than sponges are, than a lot of different things. So they actually were a potential view. They're an evolved creature now too. They may not have looked exactly like this, 500 million years ago or 700 million years ago, but this gives us an idea into the early creatures that had to live in this bacterial soup, right? that wanted, or there's my anthropomorphizing in, that were striving to survive. This is the possibility that she liked seeing about it. They are able to work with each other or create, as they create a daughter, an offspring, as they divide and replicate. At certain times, under certain conditions, they actually don't completely separate. They leave a tiny little film between the two of them, and they can make these strings of choanoflagellates. They're actually daughter cells that have grown but haven't completely separated. So that's kind of amazing. Kind of makes you think of ovum, a baby, the beginning of human life or mammalian life.
I was thinking of a pride of lions going out hunting. They would all would get together and they just sort of form a big front and attack the zebra, in this case the bacteria.
Yeah. The thing that's, it is this conglomeration of cells, but the interesting thing about it is it's not that they all come together, that they work together. They as they divide, they don't divide apart completely. So they're sister cells, right, that can make these chains. So is that multicellularity or is it not? It's the beginning of something, right? And when they have capacities that help each other, that can be furthered along then by evolution. So this is a picture, an electron microscope picture of a chain of them. But they also don't just form chains. They make these little, they're called rosettes. Certain choanoflagellates do this, and most of them don't. So this is a developmental kind of thing. And we're looking, remember, this is a 2D picture, but they actually make a whole rosette, a whole blob, right? A whole spherical thing. So that's pretty amazing too, right? It's, yeah. She creates them, yeah. Bob's asking, do these exist now? Yes, these are actual organisms that are alive now, right? That may represent what was around 1 billion years ago or something like that too, or something similar to it. This could be the instigation of some level of multicellularity. It's not definite, but it's a speculation. Over here? Let's get the... Well, on any kind of a microscope, you can change your focus and work through, and you can go to different layers of the part as you're looking through it, so you can see the whole roundness of it, the whole spherical nature of it, okay? So amazing, right? And why are they doing it? And her study for a lot of years has been trying to find out, why they would do it, why some do it, why they don't. She had a group of them that didn't do it ever at all, and then they were upset. That's when she moved out to California, so she moved her choanoflagellates along with her stereo and car and her dog and everything else and she started this again. And in the preparation for doing that, they wanted to make sure that they weren't sending that they were preparing these things properly. And one preparation was to put some antibiotic into it to try to kill off anything that would do it. And by chance, it killed off certain bacteria, which allowed other bacteria to flourish. And when they got to California, they were all flourishing. They had all these rosettes and all these ones that weren't doing it for years and years and years for. And what they believe happened was that the antibiotic killed certain bacteria, but which allowed others to flourish. Those that flourished were the ones that nurture this rosette growth. So, like I said earlier, they're in this soup, and the things that these living things do are in reaction to the soup that they're in. And when there's a certain soup, it seems to, with certain bacteria in it, it seems to give them the freedom or the power, the capacity to reproduce. And when other bacteria are in there, then they're better off as just single little choanoflagellates flying along. So you can, they're in a whole bunch of different structures. I have a few more to show you, but they can be like this when it's suited their best, when the bacterial content is of a certain nature, and as the bacterial content changes, they can start making chains or even rosettes. So the multicellular development in this case, and it's postulated because whatever made multicellular animals a billion years ago, which ended up with things like us, was in a bacterial soup that would have had a big impact on them as well. So pretty amazing stuff when you think of it, that just not wanting to study fruit flies got her into this kind of thing too. So pretty interesting. This is another more color picture of it. And like that. There's other scientists working with other creatures too. Some algae does this too under certain situations. It'll bond and to make a large rosette or a large mass, and in other cases it stays small. Excuse me. So there's quite a bit of multicellularity that seems to impact on that. Let's see. Yeah, it's that thin filament that keeps them together, and they then form these different items. And it's never done that like these came together from like 5 or 6 or 7 choanoflagellates combining together. It's always when they reproduce and make more that they keep this little thin filament and this material in there. So that's the basic concept of what could have been the start of multicellularity. What's the benefits of multicellularity? Why would creatures want to do it? We talked a bit about predation. It's easier to get your food. If you have the cells in our body are specialists, right? They do individual things that we couldn't, not one cell can do. It creates capacity to do a whole variety of different things that communicate with each other, that can protect each other. You can have digestion of a much better nature, right, when the cells in your body do these things. So the multicellularity, once it took off, seemed to be a very popular thing. In fact, if you'd say, if you'd have a guess how many times scientists think multicellularity developed, would you say once or 5 times or 20 times or what's that? Several billion times. The concept, the basic thread of multicellularity, they found at least 20 different ways in which multicellularity has been developed in time, and all in pretty much the same time frame too, right? When you think of, when they talk about all life on Earth, you can see that the DNA, the structure of life on Earth, it all has every indication of only coming from one time, one instance of life. There may have been other life developed, but if there was any life developed on Earth now in the same way that it could have developed 4 billion years ago, like we talked about in the either coming from a comet and having some residue dropped here that had life involved in it, or if it was combined by acids and different elements and molecules being hit by lightning again, what would happen to that thing that got created right now? Let's say it happened, right in Lake Michigan or something like that. By what? Everything else, right? There's a lot of predators ready to eat anything that got created right now, right? So once life got created, it became voracious, right? It grew and so on. any life that's around is a result of the successful life that happened 4 billion years ago. Any life that would occur now in any way would be immediately destroyed, be immediately eaten by the things that are around here now. We're a very voracious planet when you think of it that way. Okay? All right. So anyways, yeah, I recommend looking up, there's some really good videos that Nicole King does. And you can see them online on YouTube. And she's a very good explainer, does a nice job talking about what she does, and just kind of gets this fascinating aspect of what she's done as a young woman that got involved with science and so on. So I see we have a young scientist up in the front here. So hopefully that's something that you see about Nicole. So thanks for coming. Any questions or thoughts? I'm happy to talk about now the multicellularity development. In back?
Have microphone will travel.
Like that. I would think that there might be certain environmental conditions, such as the equator is a lot hotter than the poles. Then that could have created some variation in the development.
I'm sure, yeah. I mean, we see that now, that different creatures thrive in different environments, right? So that happens now, and I'm sure it happened at the time when situations were right for certain things to occur, they were beneficial, right?
So we know that bacteria inside our bodies helps us break down nutrients and provide it to cells. Do we know what kind of nutrients the bacteria might have back then, might have been providing to these first multicellular organisms?
It's, Nicole King knows very well what is the bacteria. They've done extensive work, and that's some of her talk in her YouTubes, that she knows very well what these bacteria do and the benefits that they provide to these things. And so that's well known. When you go back to bacteria from 1 billion years ago or 3 billion years ago, you're somewhat, you're limited by speculation. There's no evidence of them. Bacteria don't fossilize at all, in ways that we know. The only way they know much about bacteria from back then is the remnants. If it bubbled off oxygen and that's kept in a rock, or it bubbled off something else, then they can see that. And that's what they're looking for for evidence from other planets and the moons of other planets, trying to find life, evidence of life in there, and most likely it'll be something bacterial, like what we've had for most of our life too. Did it ever get to, that's a great question when you talk about life on other planets or the moons of other planets. Is it all bacterial, or did they go to this point of multicellularity too? What a fascinating step. Unicellular animals can do so little, right? They're powerful, they've been around for a long time, very successful, but can't do the things that we can do, like digest and move around and think and everything else, right? The brain, the power of the multicellular gives us a brain. These things are all working without that. So it's a great idea. In back?
Mike, would you share a little of your background?
Well, I was born a poor black child. No.
You started out as a child.
In a cabin. I grew up in Skokie, so I'm an Illinois boy, and I got interested in education. I went to school and got a teaching degree, and I wanted to teach people, not subjects, so I became an elementary teacher, taught for 7 years, and then my dad's tool and die shop that I did my best to run away from when I was young called me back in, and so I've been there, and it's out in St. Charles, and that's why we moved out to Naperville and Wheaton area. So yeah, I've been involved. Some of the people here have been to the shop that we have. We can make some pretty precise parts, close tolerance tooling and things for Weber Grill. We make the punches that make the bowls and lids for Weber Grill. We make tooling a lot for the can making industry. So that's my elevator speech about me, I guess.
And you started this whole thing on Science Sunday.
Right, yeah, there had always been forums here, and then the woman that led the forums, she was like amazing. She'd find somebody new every week to come in and talk and say something about anything. And I happened to be on a committee here, and she resigned or moved, and they said, somebody's got to take this over. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that every Sunday. I'm still running a shop and so on. So I said once a month I would talk about science, and that's what started it. And then that's how I met Scott and Joanne from the Humanist Group and so on. And Scott has done, you did a whole series in science of 3 years ago now, I guess. And so, yeah, and met a lot of everybody here, I think, from Science Sunday in the church, so. Yeah, it's been nice. So, okay. Any other multicellular? Everyone here looks like they're multicellular, so you all pass the test. There are a lot of things that aren't multicellular that are here right now, though. I'll guarantee you that. They're in your gut. They're in your brain. They're everywhere. All right. Well, like I say, Mike Albrow, the Fermi scientist, will be here in 2 weeks. And hope you come for that. I won't be here, but then we'll have some other. I think Karsten's talking about hearing and some of the ways of hearing, special hearing through bone density and stuff like that too, in 4 weeks from now. So thanks so much. Have a great day.